Well, we found a pretty interesting article here. It's called Younger American Men Lonelier Than Counterparts in Other Nations." It's a Gallup poll. A new study suggests young American men are lonelier than their counterparts in other nations. 1 in 4 U.S. men under age 35 report feeling lonely, according to compiled data released Tuesday by Gallup. Overall, 25% of men in the U.S. said they experienced bouts of loneliness in the day prior to completing the survey. The number was 10 percentage points higher than their counterparts in 38 mostly higher income democratic countries in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The median for OECD response in the 15 to 35 age bracket was 15%, respectively. Comparatively, the U.S. men felt loneliness as 7 percentage points higher than the responses recorded by U.S. women in the same age bracket. However, statistics show at least 1 in 5 younger men across the world say they feel lonely. Response in Turkey ranked the highest for feelings related to emotional isolation at 29%, followed by France at 24%, Ireland at 23%, and Canada at 22%, while 20% of young men in Lux, Luxembourg, Australia, and New Zealand said they feel lonely during large portions of the day. Gallup based their findings on aggregated data from 2023 and 2024. So the ratio of lonely men in the United States is actually not that much higher than a lot of other nations. Like it's we're at what is this, 1 in 4, and then these other places are they're peaking around double digits as well. And I think that's because, as I've said before, a lot of the worst traits of people in the digital era is not bound by borders. The World Wide Web, and like just its national, its influence on the world extends beyond one country or two countries. If you're seeing people act ridiculous and just crazy, chances are they either live in the United States or some other country. It's really not a thing that's specific to one region. But I mean, I'm not too surprised by this. The I mean, they're gonna hate me for saying this, but it's the truth. There are a lot of different factors. I believe that we could talk about how, because of social media, a lot of people would rather just like stare at their computer than actually talk to someone or hang out, and that can contribute to it. But I believe if we're going the angle of like relationship stuff, if we turn to romance, let's just say American men have some really slim pickings. They have a pretty crappy roster to to choose between. I remember what tends to happen on sites like Twitter is that anytime some guy is writing something nasty about some woman, and this is also repeated in other instances, but it's usually like spurred by something, there will be a person, usually a woman, who's like, "I don't care about the men loneliness epidemic." Ha ha ha. Basically like laughing at the idea of there being miserable men by virtue of one of us, writing something that she doesn't like. But what I remember one person writing was that men needed to create, like, basically they were themselves to blame for the epidemic, right? That, oh, if they made more efforts to talk to people and places to interact and whatever. But I said, if you're a guy who, like, again, if we're just using the romance as an example, let's say wanted a date, and you went on dating websites, you talked to girls at the various schools you went to, maybe you asked out women at the mall, maybe just whatever variety of options that you employed, and you didn't get that end result. I'm not really sure realistically what more you could have done. Like, I know people, a lot of these grifters doing the whole dating coach stuff, they talk about going to the gym and all the little other ways of self-improvement. But honestly, if you're like a normal person who either goes to school full time or works full time to make ends meet, you don't actually like have the time to just sit there at a gym multiple times a week for hours on end exercising. Most people in the United States can't afford $1,000 emergency, so you're probably not that wealthy if you're a relatively like young guy. So I don't know. Just again, it's like when you actually start breaking down what is realistically achievable for uh guys in terms of trying to appeal to women. It starts to like get a lot more just limited again, because then you start contrasting what these different chicks want, and you could be here all day trying to I said before, if you're a guy trying to figure out what the modern female wants, you will lose your mind, you'll go crazy. um but no, I think if we're just going off of stuff with talking to people in relationships, we're in an era where isolation is just becoming a more and more common thing. People are getting to a point where they'd rather stare at computer screens than just go outside and talk to somebody. Um, we're getting to a point where the only time people even interact with each other in real life is if they're ordering some food from somewhere, or some other like service is being done for them in terms of they go somewhere and speak to a person to achieve whatever they're trying to get done, whether it's an order or buying something, just that kind of thing, or maybe it's the Amazon delivery driver. And it's really sad because, like, for me, I've talked about how I would objectively like to have better relationships with relatives, right? And then people will say, oh well, like it takes two to tango, or basically like try to say that I have to also do something to make that happen. But what I've said before is, if I look at the living relatives, and the majority of them don't reach out to me. If I reach out to them, they don't call you back, they don't write back. If you want to like do something with someone but they keep turning you down, or you go to see them and all they're doing is staring at their phone while you're talking to them. You try to tell them something and they forget it or don't listen to. I mean, at a certain point, you say, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to bother with this. And then look, then suddenly there's one group of people who, if the world was a normal place, would be the main ones you could confide in and possibly not feel lonely with. Suddenly they're not available. I talked before about living with two relatives who would just, one sits in their room on their phone, TV, and talking with and interacting with everything but one of the people that lives with them, and the other one did the same exact thing. So it was like, okay, well, there's not really much of a difference in terms of my, quote unquote loneliness in being with these people or not being with them. So there's just no point in being with them altogether. It's just that it's the appearance of not being lonely when you are still lonely because they're not even bothering to talk to you or receptive to doing anything with you. And then we go over to the romantic stuff, and we're going to go more in depth on this when I do the It Doesn't Matter video. I got the script for that mostly done, but it's like I've talked before about that dream of meeting a woman, and you go on some dates with her for maybe a year, 2 years, and you and this person become closer. You feel like you can trust her, and then you marry her and then have children, and you and her are this like united front who are both working full time and able to get a house and maybe some decent cars, just to like build something together. But when you see chicks who are, if they're receptive to liking you in a romantic way, live so goddamn far away that that there's like no chance they would ever come and live over where you are just to be with you. uh and then you have chicks who, if they're not whether they're not interested in you or not, you wouldn't be interested in wanting to do with them romantically because they're doing the whole gold digger angle at a time where you really can't afford to have a grown adult just sitting at home while one person is expected to pay for 3, 4, 5 people. um Again, those factors together, and we don't even have to throw in the chicks that don't want kids, but those things together make you basically say, okay, well, if I can't get the things I want out of being with a woman, again, whether it's the short-term stuff like being able to touch this person because the long distance crap, or the long-term stuff like wanting to have a family because the woman is just against doing it altogether, well, it really seems like it's like, yeah, I'm lonely, but I don't think I'd be any better off with these half-baked, um non-ideal circumstances that they're willing to like do, because it's still not what I would want. It's like a surface level version of it, but not really. Oh yes, I have this girlfriend who lives in another country who I can't touch and who I only can talk to over the phone. Oh my god, I am so in love. It's that's why I said everything's like, it's so diluted, right? Like having a family's cool, like parents and siblings, but if you guys don't talk to each other, if they don't ever reach out to you, if they don't actually try to do anything with you, then they're pointless. It's useless. It's worthless. And if you're talking about having romantic relationships with chicks, but then you know that this is never, even in like the short term, going to be what you want, well then that's useless, that's pointless, that's worthless, and you just want nothing to do with them. So like, again, even if I were to categorize myself as being lonely, I just don't think the people around me, when taken in sum total, are would ever rise to mitigating that, would ever like be what they would need to be for me to actually want more of them. You know, it's just, it's going to like you, I would rather know that I'm alone than be in circumstances that make it appear that I'm not, when it's still basically crap. uh oh my god, I love having relatives that don't check on me, that I go to see them and they're staring at their damn phone all day. I love having, this romantic partner who I cannot touch, and if I want to, like, you know go and eventually have any further stuff with her, I have to give up my dream of ever getting married or having children. Yay, so exciting. So yeah, it's real. I just think male loneliness is more about just people in general breaking down as a group to where there's just no incentive to seek them out or want anything to do with them, because they've become such a rancid roster. Like, I say we live in a rotten society. That's become one of my catchphrases, but it's true. Like, just people nowadays are, and this is not true of like people who are older, like 80, 70, 60, but it's like once you start going to those lower groups, right? The 50-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, 30 especially, and 20, a lot of them just want to sit on their phone and computer all day long. And that is the thing that has done more than anything else to kill the ability for people to have any kind of meaningful, relationships, whether they be platonic or romantic. And that will continue to just eat away at the ability to do that.